topic.
All right.
Okay.
So we had gotten started on the question of why would there be some people who don't want to hear anything that I have to say? And we were talking about various reasons why some of the things that we have to say are not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's that things that are built in wisdom are generally not acceptable by people who are operating instinctually and operating
Mm-hmm.
out of instinctual kind of fear. And so let's use the vaccine as an example of this, okay? That people are generally afraid. And because they're afraid, they don't know what to be afraid of first because they've heard so many different stories. And
Mm-hmm.
so um, one of the one of the big issues has to do then with the fact that it's easy to make people afraid if they operate out of instincts,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole point of the instinct is uh, to for us to try to keep our survival going by doing things to survive, and that we it
Mm-hmm.
means that we operate out of fear in order to preserve ourselves when in fact there was no real danger at all. Or a better way of thinking of it is that we need to see through examination and investigation that which is truly dangerous and truly fearful, and that which is merely talked up to get people to be afraid, or that the people are operating out of ignorance or superstition. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And so, in that way, we look scientifically and we begin to look at what the scientists are saying. We listen to what the vaccine producers and the doctors and the scientists and the CDC and all of the data and statistics rather than going by what the news broadcasters say. And we
Yep.
also can see the data and the statistics that people are not looking at in the United States. Here in Thailand, I have the ability to see both the statistics of what's happening in Thailand with such a severe lockdown versus the wide open disaster that is happening in the United States is based in fear. So basically, wisdom would say that if a pandemic is coming, that we should take precautions for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very fortunate now that there is a vaccine and that Thailand is madly scrambling now. They thought, in fact, the government thought that they were safe before the Delta, but now that the Delta strain is here, they're back madly trying to get everybody vaccinated. But the Thai people are not against the vaccination. And in fact, you cannot even go out on the street without having a mask on because it's socially acceptable. That the cops in the beginning never actually stopped or punished anyone from being out on the street without a mask. They stood at the street corners giving people masks when they weren't wearing them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You probably heard about belling the cat.
Belling.
Belling the cat, putting a
Mm.
bell on the cat.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just.
The mice were really afraid of this cat because this cat was really excellent at catching mice, and he could
Uh-huh.
sneak right up on them. And one of the mice got a bright idea. Maybe if we had a bell on that cat, we could hear it when he comes. And so the mice tried to sneak up to the cat when it was asleep and put the bell on and all that kind of stuff, but the cat was too good for them, and they would run away immediately. But then one of the mice got the idea, well, what happens if we give the bell the cat as a gift, as a present? And we all clap and he puts the bell on himself, and everybody loves it. Okay, so that's belling the cat. All right, so that's a way of looking at that. The Thai people got the point, and they're
Mm-hmm.
wearing these masks, and that it's useful. But there, meanwhile, in Burma, there is a major problem, and you have a lot of people trying to escape from Burma, not only trying to escape the coronavirus, but they've always come to Thailand for employment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
I
so the
actually.
Burmese are the ones who have given it. That's why the Thai government is so interested in getting the Burmese vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And the Burmese go and live in places that are have a lot of tourism. Phuket, Pattaya. There's a lot of
Mhm.
Burmese on this island, Koh Samui, wherever the Farang go and bring their tourist dollars, there will be Burmese working
Mhm.
for the Thais who own the land or the property or whatnot. So
But
back, go ahead.
Dhammarato, I just want to ask you now, how can you assure that you're receiving the correct information that scientific community is giving and not interpreted through channels that is delivered through, like not misinterpreted actually?
Well,
Like,
that would mean that you would not listen to the commentators comment on what the CDC officials say. Listen to what the CDC officials say. Listen to what Dr. Fauci says. Listen to what the medical doctors say, because not all of them are going to agree, but they're going to have a few outliers, in fact, but mostly they generally agree.
well, in
And
fact,
it's only the
the
really big. Now, I cannot say what's happening in Russia, but I can say because I'm watching, because I don't speak Russian and don't have
yeah.
much interest. But I do know that um, that a lot of the disinformation is based in fear rather than knowledge. And so this is a really, really clear example of that. Is let's do it by knowledge rather than out of fear. And most of the reasons why the people in the US are afraid is because they're talking about liberty, and liberty has nothing to do with this.
Mhm. Now,
Okay?
even within doctors, scientists, there are opinions that are completely opposite
Yes,
on the
but
fact.
they're basically a few of them, not a bunch, and they basically can be weeded out because they never really get in charge anyway. A good example of that is Rand Paul, who actually is a doctor. He's an ophthalmologist, but he is nuts, and he is known to be nuts.
Mhm.
Okay, but he's one of those doctors who is an outlier in the sense that he's uh, but the question would be, is he taking that position merely because he wants the votes from the people who take that position, or does he actually take that position himself? That's what happens with a lot of politicians is they take a position only for political purposes, and yet secretly they go get the vaccine. That
Mhm.
all the Republicans who have been caught out and labeled as having the coronavirus now, you look back on them and find out that they have, in fact, been vaccinated. Even though they're screaming about being vaccinated is a terrible thing, they all behind the scenes, the Republicans, the politicians, the doctors, they all go get the vaccine, and then they come out in public and start talking about how they can control the people, that vast group of people who were too ignorant to see through those lies. Why are they ignorant? They're ignorant because they don't look at the data. And so they're operating out of instincts. They're operating out of fear.
Mm.
And so I see the fear in you right now.
I feel like I trust my own immunity more than vaccine. And I read up about vaccines in
Okay,
different.
guess how many people have died by trusting their own immunity system?
Um, uh, well, again,
At least a 500,000 in the United States have died because they trusted their immune system rather than
what,
taking the vaccine.
okay, their immunity sucked probably
Pardon?
because their
Even
diets were.
little children are dying now because they were not vaccinated. All kinds of people. No, you cannot say that, oh, those people are sicker than I was, therefore I'm going to make it through, because you don't know that for sure. You're taking a gamble based upon fear rather than upon real information.
And I'm torn in between this.
Well, the safer way out, then, that's the way that we're looking. The safer way out is to get the vaccine. Now, I have heard people say, oh, the vaccine itself is dangerous, but in fact, we have no data for that. Absolutely no one has checked into the hospital because all they've got is just the vaccine. No, people check into the hospital because they haven't had the vaccine.
But how about the fact that it was tested only for, it was not really tested, like
Yes,
a
it
normal.
was. You would not believe how heavy duty it was tested. First off, it's got to go through preliminary trials at each individual pharmacy before it goes through detailed trials at the pharmacy, and then it has to go through a number of trials through the in the United States. It has to go through the FDA, but eventually, the real trial is how many people have had the shot and how many people have had adversely affected by it versus how many people who are dying because they haven't had the shot. And that's the real data. That in fact it has been proven statistically in a vast population. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people now. Some of, let us say, 100 million have had the shot, 100 million haven't had the shot, and the 100 million that haven't had the shot are the ones who are getting sick and dying. And the ones who have had the shot, by the hundreds of millions of people, they have had only a few cases of the people also positively testing for the virus, but not getting sick, not being hospitalized, and not dying from it.
Yeah.
This is the data. And so when you follow the data, that means that you're following the wisdom. You're waking up and looking rather
Why am
than
I
going
feeling?
by feeling.
Well, exactly. Why am I feeling so uncomfortable about it? Like, it's. I feel like I don't believe it.
That's not
Yeah.
that's not the issue. The discomfort that you feel is the
Yeah.
way that you're operating rather than recognizing that this is not an issue of how you feel. This is an issue of the data. This is actually what wisdom is really all about is waking up out of our fears and our anxieties and our feelings and look at what's really going on so that we could do the right thing and then feel safe.
But the exactly what's really going on, it is not uh given to normal to people as it is. How do I know that it's a correct information? Whatever is given to me, whatever data are given to me, how do you know that it's a correct information?
Well, for one thing, we could go to the ultimate, and that is that you're not ever going to be sure of anything that you ever heard. But there's two ways of looking at something, or two ways, let us say, to walk into a room. There's the Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Watson way, and there's the Sherlock Holmes way. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm talking about, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Dr. Watson was a medical doctor in that set of novels.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes, yeah.
what? But he was constantly impressed with Sherlock Holmes. But the characteristic of Sherlock Holmes is that magnifying glass. That he
Mm-hmm.
looked and he looked and he evaluated and he investigated, while his friend Dr. Watson surmised and thought about it and operated by feelings rather than operating by data, information, investigation. This is the major thing about the Buddha. That's why a lot of people would say that the Buddha was the first scientist,
Mm-hmm.
because we're really looking at what's going on rather than looking at how we feel.
Yeah, but the problem is just so vast that if I'm not personally looking at the data, raw data myself, I don't trust that source that's delivering that data is
So you then
trustworthy.
follow your fear rather than following the wisdom of doing the investigation that you
Mm,
need to do.
yeah, this is
Okay.
so hard. I
No,
can't
it's
really.
not. It's really easy. It really is easy to make that change of reference from being the victim that feels and doesn't know and is confused, because a lot of the fear comes from doubt because you don't know who to believe.
Yeah, I really don't.
So if you
Unless
don't
it's
know who to
something else.
believe, then you need to go find out for yourself. And
Yes.
the statistics are very, very clear that the people who go into the hospital in the United States are because they haven't been vaccinated. And that the people who do not go to the hospital, even if they've got COVID, have been vaccinated, but even those are very rare. In other words, I forgot what the term that they used, fallback or something like that, is only about 1% of the people who have the vaccine then get infected with the virus. That's because the virus is that powerful. It's really, really a strong virus. And the planet has been almost devoided of humans many times because of viruses, but in those days they didn't have vaccines. The bubonic plague of the 1400s, for instance, and there's been others. And
Mhm.
people have been completely wiped out. Even people who thought that they would be protected and they wouldn't get sick, they got sick anyway and died. And generally, the only reason why people survived was because they were in isolation enough to not be around that illness, that virus, or whatever it was.
Mhm. Yeah.
That we have to recognize that we are temporary, we are weak, that humans are not all of that powerful and all of that strong. That what you have to have is a strong mind, but you have to recognize that the body is weak and that medical science is often quite valuable. The Buddha highly recommended medicine. He called it one of the four requisites. You have to have adequate medicine. You have to have adequate food. You have to have
Yeah.
adequate shelter. You have to have adequate clothing. But the whole point is just adequate's enough. In this case, the vaccine is adequate, and not having the vaccine is not adequate, puts you in real danger. And yet, the dangers that the ordinary ignorant person has is fear of the unknown, which means they're kind of afraid of everything
Mhm.
rather than trusting the facts and trusting the data. That's a point of wisdom. That's an important point about wisdom. And this is how we're going to start living our lives, is based in wisdom by investigation of the data right in front of us, as opposed to continuing to live according to our feelings. And a lot
Okay.
of
How?
people actually don't even like that kind of idea. They want to continue along in their, and in fact, everybody has that quality of just follow your heart.
Well,
Cut
yeah.
right? Okay. Following one's heart is really dangerous. It's an ignorant thing to do. We need to wake up and look at what's going on and stop following our hearts, because our hearts make us angry, our hearts make us fearful, our hearts make us sad. And the reality is there's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to be sad. There's no reason to be angry.
Well, okay. So how about going back to like medicine and talking about that adequate medicine helps, which
Mm.
is fine. How about placebo effect, when you with your mind basically can cure yourself by
Well,
just.
that's exactly why the trials are done the way that they are, is to compensate for that placebo effect, so that you can get some real data rather than that which is based upon emotional. Yes, that's absolutely true. In fact, I've had whole conversations with people about placebos, from how to move it from 28% all the way up to 46%. The highest level of placebo effect they've ever measured was when they actually take the person, put them in a hospital, maybe it's a fake hospital, with fake medical equipment, fake nurses, fake doctors, and even fake IVs that have nothing in them, and the persons get better just by going to the hospital. Let me out of here. It's probably
Well, that.
the part of the placebo is that this place is expensive and I need to get out of here, and I don't care whether their medicine's any good or not. So yeah. That's the placebo effect. And it can be measured, and we can actually use it to recognize in our own self that we do have sometimes the power to cure ourselves, but you can't cure yourself with the power of. Now, here's the way that if you did get the virus and you were sick in bed, then you do have a whole lot of something to do, and that is keep breathing because we know that it's a virus that affects the lungs. So if you have the COVID, now we have to start taking care of it at that level, which means that we have to sit up rather than laying back on our back because then, in fact, that's what they in the beginning, the doctors themselves were killing a lot of the coronavirus patients by mistake. They did
Mm-hmm.
two things that, in combination, killed many thousands of people. Number one is that they put them in a traditional hospital bed, which means people are laying on their back and they've
Mm-hmm.
got breathing problems. And
Mm-hmm.
so they put
Mm-hmm.
them on ventilators, which is not the kind of ventilation that someone actually needs. It's just whatever the machine will do. And the doctors have to monitor the machines, but it needs to be monitored in real time. That if a doctor is really going to do that machine correctly, he can't just set it and forget it. He's got to stand there and readjust it because that equipment is not sophisticated enough. So once someone goes on a ventilator, the likelihood of them coming off a ventilator is quite remote. So if I'm in the hospital and I'm sick, please don't put me on that ventilator. Let me do my own breathing.
Now, with that, well, okay, didn't they have the data that ventilators don't help, and they still, you know what I mean? That we
They
did
have had to
what we're
change the
supposed to.
way that they were using them. Yes, the doctors could see this. So now they changed the
So,
way that I could see it before they did, but they did see it and they started to change. That's one of the reasons why not so many people die of the coronavirus is because they're getting better medical attention, including given better ways of breathing. In other words, giving them more oxygen and letting them do their own breathing, and number one, putting their bodies in a position so they can breathe rather than laying them on their back and then putting them on a ventilator. The doctors already know about this. This is well known research.
okay, but
But it
before
took them
that,
a while. It took them a couple of months. Right. Back in
what?
2016, during February and March, they were killing a whole lot of people. But by April of 2000, they figured it out.
Yeah. So how could I trust the doctor with no with the data they had prior that this would help me? In fact, that would help. That would have killed me.
Well, yeah, you would have died then, whether because in those days you didn't even have a corona vaccine. You would have died.
I know, but
A
data
lot of
emerges.
people did. That's why they developed the vaccine, is so many people wouldn't die. That's why they changed their medical procedures so people in the hospital that had the COVID and were really sick with it didn't die. Now, in
Yeah.
fact, the way that they're doing it in Thailand is that they have.
Online.
It's funny that we've gotten off into coronavirus and all of that because this is actually just a clear example of all of the other stuff that people believe, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hear the actual facts because some of times it terrifies them. Some people find great comfort, for instance, in believing in rebirth and reincarnation, and so it would terrify them to hear that they're going to die. Just like you're kind of terrified when we just talked to you about that point that you would have died. You would have died whether you had doctors or not.
But exactly. Well, I mean, I'm. Isn't it the point of being okay with everything, being okay with death too? So I don't really feel like I care when I
Right.
die.
If you are unafraid of death, only then can you be truly free of fear of life. You can live happily only when you're willing to die happily. And you are going to die. Your only choice is whether you die happily or not. That's your only choice, is whether you die happily or you die miserably. Most people choose to die miserably. Why? Because they die instinctually. They die trying to preserve life when in fact it's time to let it go. No matter how strong the survival instinct is, it always loses. Every animal that's born dies. Every laptop that's ever born dies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, right now, thinking about death is not terrifying, but I'm not experiencing the closeness to the death, I guess.
We were talking about it, and you were experiencing it very closely a moment ago inside your own mind. And you felt it too. I could see that you were feeling it.
The death, the, I
Yeah,
mean,
when
it's
we're
just,
talking about all of those people dying, and and you're saying, why should I trust the doctors? The answer is you're going to die whether you trust the doctors or not.
so why do you even try? Why do you even like follow any kind of data? I don't know. I feel like I don't want to act upon anything. Just let it be. Let it happen, whatever. If I die today with the doctor, without, let it just be.
Okay. So what you're actually getting at then, Anna, is the idea of what's the meaning of life? What's the point?
Yeah. Then what's the point?
Right.
Do why?
Guess what? There is no authority figure anywhere that defines what the meaning of life is. That every individual human, or actually all of the animals, I mean, I've got a couple of dogs here who have figured out the meaning of life. Their meaning of life is to lay on the porch. You could, whatever meaning of life you want, that's your meaning of life. You put your own meaning into it, you always have. But when you recognize now that you are actually putting that meaning in life, that means that, wait a minute, I can change the meaning, or I don't even have to have any meaning. I can just, there's another way of looking at it. Meaning means that there is work to be done that has a purpose and intention, a meaning to it. And so we have gotten our lives set up to where we're trying to work so that we get something done that we can fulfill the meaning of life or whatever like that. And the whole point of the change of reference is to begin to see that it's not work at all, it's a toy, and that there's no meaning to it. If you were your little child and you got a great big clock about this big, what does it mean? It's got no meaning. Some of the kids like to bang on the bell. Other kids want to tear the clock apart. Others are really interested in that spring in there. Boy, I can do a whole bunch of stuff with that spring in that alarm clock. Okay. What's the meaning of the alarm clock to the child is completely different than the meaning of that alarm clock to the adult.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I've been trying to actually mostly interview people around me for the meaning of life, because I feel like I can't give myself the answer.
Well, guess what? You
And
Nobody's ever sure. That's one of the things that we're not sure about. Why am I here? Guess what? That's an irrelevant question.
okay,
The question
and
is, am I here or not? The answer is, well, if I'm not thinking about someplace else, I'm probably thinking about right here. That means I am here.
uh-huh.
But there is no meaning in life. This
Mm-hmm.
is one of the reasons that Buddhism or the Buddha was talking about sunyata. Everything is empty of a self. And if
Mm-hmm.
everything is empty of a self, that means everything is empty of meaning. Because only a self. Now, what do we mean by a self? A better word to use actually is the word soul. People can understand the word soul better than using the word self. Because what is the soul? The soul means the deepest part, the essence, the nut, and something that is so powerful and so strong that it's permanent. It cannot be affected. Even death itself cannot affect this thing called a soul. And then they say, oh, I'm a soul. That means that death cannot affect me because I will survive death. The answer is there is no soul in there, that you are temporary. and that you will die. And that's okay because that's what happens to everybody. The reason that it's not okay is because you don't like it.
Yeah. All right. Because it's the opposite of living. It's I don't like it. I
But
guess.
death is part of living. Everything that starts ends. Imagine this.
Yeah.
Imagine that you were on a train and the train stopped, but you didn't get off the train.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, you're going to have what trains can you just stay on? Every train that I know of has a railhead or a parking place, or they stop for the night, and you're stuck in that car, probably
Mm-hmm.
out in the boondocks, a long way from the city. And you could
Mm-hmm.
have gotten off that train at any time. But we didn't because of whatever delusion that we had. I know I did that one time. I knew I was on the bus going in the wrong direction. It was the right number bus. This was in Bangkok, and they have buses that have a route, and the same bus number has that route going and coming. And I got on the bus pretty close to the Watt, but I got on the wrong side of the road, basically. Got on the
Mm-hmm.
right bus on the wrong side of the road, which means I went all the way down to the terminal because I had the idea that they'll eventually get back to the Watt. Guess what? It didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It went to the terminal and stopped, and the bus driver got off.
It goes only one direction.
Right, it was only going in that one direction. That was that bus's job, and so there was no place that I could go get another number 48 bus to get
Yeah.
back to the Watt anywhere around there.
Now, how about the clinical death or like near death experience? Do people
Near
die?
death is not death.
Yeah, but why is it so powerful? Because
Anyone, well, because the brain does crazy things when it's got crazy chemicals inside the mind. And a near death experience means that the brain itself has got a lot of crazy chemicals in it, and it's likely within moments or whatever for the person to actually die. But the person is still alive. So a near death experience is not near death, it's just an experience of the mind or the brain in a very weird state.
mm-hmm.
But they have done enough research to find out that even though people have the idea that they are floating above their own bodies, you've heard that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so all the doctors and all the experimenters have put numbers and signs and all kinds of things on top of the cabinets in case somebody does float up to the top and looks down. They can also look around and see there's all kinds of messages for you here, and nobody ever comes up with those messages because they're not actually seeing. They're just still inside the brain. They just
Mm-hmm.
have the feeling that they're floating. They have the feeling of a white tunnel. They
Mm-hmm.
have a feeling of security of finally meeting grandma. But the grandma that they're meeting in their near death experience is not a real grandma in heaven. There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is happening inside the mind. And it's okay for someone who is in a near death experience to go ahead and die. It's going to happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to die.
But the fact that you have this ability to be in your mind and not be physically connected to your body.
That's still an imagination. It's still a dream. It's still a concept. It's not real.
So unless you're experiencing it, it's not real. Unless you experience with your physical
Unless
body.
you can hear it with the, see it with the eyes, hear it with the ears, touch it with the hands, smell it with the nose, taste it with the tongue, it's not real. Now we can extend those things. For instance, infrared night goggles are still used to get the data through the senses of the eyes,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a machine help, just like you and I can see each other with the aid of the help of the computers and the networks and internet and all of that kind of stuff. Still, the experience is coming in through your eyes, sensual experience. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what the Buddha is teaching is let's spend more time in sensual experience and stop spending so much time in mental experience.
Okay, so what is okay, there is this data out there, and it's proven that, for example, if your arm moves, it's not that you recognize, it's not that your brain dictating to the arm to move, it's the arm moving and then brain logically explaining.
It works both ways. The hands will move by themselves in
Yeah.
certain conditions. The question is can, let us say, let's say it this way: are you ticklish? Especially on the, what's the most ticklish part of your body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Can you stand there? Let us say, talking about the feet, because many people are ticklish on your feet. Can you actually hold your foot still and let it be tickled and have those sensations and kind of watch the foot jump or jerk a little bit, but your mind is holding that foot still no matter what sensations happen to that foot? You're going to hold it still. Do you have that kind of mind control, or is the foot going to move itself? You know, even a tender infant. This is part of the teachings of the Buddha, that a tender infant, if it touches a hot coal with its foot or its hand, the tender infant will draw the hand back or the foot back from the coal long before, like 2, 3 seconds before the child starts to cry or scream or do anything. But the hand has already done all the work of becoming safe. All the rest of it is just emotional baggage.
But no, but the signal that travels from the nerve endings up to your brain,
Are
that takes
slow because the
this.
nerve endings in your hand are much faster in your hand than they are going all the way to the brain. So your hand will actually withdraw before the brain even knows that the hand got burned.
But isn't it already? That's the point. So it's not the brain controlling the arm. So it's. I'm so confused now. With
It's a feedback mechanism.
okay.
You're looking for only a one way cause effect relationship. No, the pathway goes both directions. The pathway goes both directions. And the more training or the more skill you have, the more you can control with the frontal cortex what the body is doing. You can learn to play the violin. That's amazing. I mean, learning to play the violin is one of the most remarkable things that I know of that a human can do. And it's all done in the left hand, which is the hand that they don't even use very much.
Mhm.
It's amazing what the hand will do, but that takes training over and over and over and over and over again. And with violin, you even have to train the fingers to get the right note. The piano, you can hit the note. It's so you hit that note, it's going to sound the same, and it gets flat over time. But a C is generally a C all day long. With the little finger, the C on that violin is not the C. It depends upon what the finger is doing, is whether it's a
Mhm.
C or not. And so that takes a lot of skill. And it's amazing the kind of skills that we can develop. But if we don't develop those skills, then we don't have the value of those skills. And so
Mhm.
learning to hold the foot still when it's tickled, that takes mind control.
Mhm.
Okay. This is part of what is the spiritual practice, but we have to start practicing on things that are easy. And as we develop the skill, we move from something that is dead easy to pretty easy. And then when that thing becomes dead easy, then we move to something that's pretty easy. And then when that thing becomes dead easy, then we move to something else that's pretty easy. And pretty soon we could pick up 400 pounds. Before we couldn't pick up 20.
So I feel like every time I'm trying to remind myself to be in the moment, or I'm not trying. I'm reminding myself to be in the moment,
Hmm.
taking a breath, just stopping for a second. I feel I am getting it done for that moment. That easy thing. Is
Yeah.
that the easiest as it goes?
Yeah.
What's the next one?
Well, when you do that one, do you get it so that's so easy? but because that's a remarkable thing to wake up, to see what you're doing, to throw that unwholesome thought out and put a wholesome thought in the mind is one of the most important tasks that you'll ever learn to do. So get good at it rather than looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You're like the first grader that wants to know about second grade, and the second grader wants to know about fifth grade, and the fifth grade wants to know about college, and college guys want to know about about PhD programs, and the first grader needs to be in the first grade
Mm-hmm.
and learn the first grade and get really good at it. I made that major mistake when I was in music. I remember it well, that I wanted to play the music that the other kids could play, and I couldn't play it yet. And so instead of playing the music that I could play, I was failing at playing music that was too hard to play. And we all do that. That's where it's actually got a technical term, and there was a book written about it that was the number one bestseller back in the 1960s. The name of the book is The Peter Principle.
Uh,
And what it means in the business world is that everyone becomes promoted in their job to their level of incompetence, and that's where they stay. In other words, so long as you're really good at your job, you'll keep getting promotions, but they will eventually promote you to a job you can't do.
mm-hmm.
And that's where you're stuck. That's the Peter principle. But the point really is that we all go around trying to do things that we can't do because we don't have the skills. Monkey see, monkey do. Well, that monkey's got skills that you don't. If you develop the skills, then you can do it too. But that's the issue is let's do some skill development. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
most important skills that I know of is sati, to remember to apply the other skills.
Mm-hmm. Now, all right, it's easy to do it right now. Now, I was in a situation recently when I was handling 20 kids and we were staying in line for food and everything was just thrown off. The people who were serving food were thrown off, the kids, the chaos. Now, it's intense situation. We have
Actually,
timer.
the kids though experience probably the chaos that the adults were having. If the adults in that situation were cool and easygoing, the kids would probably be cool and easygoing too. They were following their herding instinct. They were going along to get along. So when you got adults who are freaked out, the kids are going to freak out too.
Correct. And I thought I was keeping myself cool to a certain point, and then I just snapped.
Yeah. Well, rubber bands are like that. You stitch them very, very taut, and they look like that they're cool, and then they break.
Yeah, but so that was my first grade there that I can't even pass this test of keeping myself calm and
That's the
cool.
whole. That's the whole reason for the Buddha talking about going into seclusion, so that we can develop the skills easily, so that when we do go back to the world, where things are tough, now we've got the skills that we need, so that we can handle the tough stuff that's out in the world. But we need to get into seclusion. Now that can be seen as a particular task, never mind what it is. Let's talk about it as an email. I've got an email to write, but I don't want to write it. But I sit down, I've told myself I've got to write it, and so I sit down and I write it, and I hate it while I'm writing it. That's the normal way that we do things. Another way of saying that I've got that email, okay, well, let me first get myself into a really good state. And I know that I could do that email. And then I go and I start doing that email. I get about a paragraph into it, and then I say, wait a minute, now I'm not liking things so much. Let me withdraw, be in seclusion, get away from that email, and get my mind back together again. And now that
Mm-hmm.
I got my mind back together again and I feel on top of the world, now I can go get that email and finish it. This is the way that we practice is the real skill is developed in seclusion and then put into application when we need it out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not a conceptualized world, but the real world that you actually have to deal with, like 20 different kids right here in the room. You're not talking about an abstract 20 kids that you've got the names on a poster or something. These are real kids right in front of you. This is part of your real world. It's
Mm-hmm.
real. Okay. And the question is, can you stay real, or do you have to get freaked out because of all the energy that's there? Are you going to be overwhelmed, or are you on top of this? In other words, you can have the kids just going all over the place, and you can just stand there and say, hey kids. I actually did that this morning. I'm talking about something that happened here in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that mom was unhappy and angry at 9-year old. 9-year old was having a pity party and crying and all of that, and that makes mom even more angry, and the kid cries even more. Neither one of them had an adult to come in and say, "Hey, let's cool this off.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty, you stop crying. Mom, you stop yelling."
Yeah, but it's just easy to say this, and it's hard for them to implement it. It's
Well, that's because you need the skills. It's not
Mhm.
hard to implement it. It's that you don't have the skills to
No,
implement it.
no.
Think of it from that perspective. Okay, well, let's go get the skills. It's not hard. Hard is just a bad attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Hard means is that I don't have the skills, basically, but for me is built into it's hard. Well,
Mm-hmm.
no, this is easy enough if I got the skills. I can handle this. Just because mom is angry and yelling, I don't have to be angry and yelling. Just because baby is crying and upset, I don't have to cry and upset.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes practice, it takes skill.
Yeah, I want to skip this level and already be skilled, like without training. It's a lot of perseverance, I would say. I
I
guess.
wouldn't. I would call it escape.
Yeah.
Here's the issue: is that in our society, escape is a no-no. We're not supposed to escape. But
Mm-hmm.
with the Buddhist teaching, it's a number one given. That's what we do: is to get away from it, to escape. The
Mm-hmm.
word escaped is used in the sutras a lot. In one case, gratification, dangers, and escape. That if we see only the gratification in something, but we don't see the dangers, then we can't do anything. We're stuck with it. But if we see that what is gratifying to us is also dangerous, now we
Mm-hmm.
can escape it because of knowledge. We can get away from it. We do not have to keep it. This is also the issue of seclusion, to get away from the world so that we can clean things out. But generally, when we go into seclusion, the first thing that happens is we begin to see all of the stuff that we brought with us.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Yeah.
we become secluded with that too. And once we've gotten completely secluded, now we can really enjoy our life. And
Mm-hmm.
everything around us becomes a toy. The question is can you continue living that way so that everything you touch remains a toy, or is something going to actually turn into work? Does it
Yeah.
take on meaning? Do you
Yeah.
have to do it? Or you just merely do the things that you want to do? Now that's freedom. Freedom just to do what you want to do. But the thing of it is that the freedom comes from wanting to do things that you used to not want to do, because the problem was that you didn't have the right kind of wisdom in your wanting. So you wanted it ignorantly, wanting things that you can't have. If you want wisely, then you always get exactly what you want. You get it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
That's wise wanting, like taking a deep breath.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah. That's
So
right.
this is how we
Mm-hmm.
practice. Now, anyway, the first thing that we had talked about was the issue of that some things people don't want to hear. That is actually facts, and we gave some. But this is another item on that list, and that is the meaning of life. Life doesn't have any meaning; it just enjoys being.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people say, "Oh no, I don't like that. I want my life to have some meaning."
Mm-hmm. Now, Dhammarato, going into seclusion, can you is that possible just by taking a breath that's already a seclusion, or you literally need to have maybe like
When you're well skilled, that takes
oh,
skill.
okay.
And so, but that's the way to practice. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're really skilled at it, then one breath will do. A little dab will do you.
Now to get to that little one breath equals seclusion, it takes what, a year of complete seclusion.
Don't worry about it.
It's
Just notice that you're going in the direction of seclusion when you begin to pay attention to what the body is doing instead of paying attention to what you like and don't like.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just take a good deep breath. I'm okay. I don't have to think about any of that stuff. I don't have to go find meaning in all of that junk.
Yeah, that's so simple.
It really is. And yet, people want it to be complicated, so they don't want to hear these kinds of teachings.
Mm-hmm.
So, wanting things to be complicated when they're simple, wanting to have meaning in life when there's no meaning in life, wanting
Mm-hmm.
things to last forever when things are going to be temporary and we die, wanting to have great power over other people when in fact we don't even have any power over ourselves.
No, we don't.
And so, those are some of the reasons why people don't like to hear the Dhamma. They want
Mm-hmm.
to make it magical. They want to add spiritual power, magical power, rebirth, reincarnation. Basically, we want to conceptualize reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to intake all this information and sort it out in my brain.
Hmm. Right. So, what we're doing is we're beginning to look at um, all of the lies that you have been told.
Mm-hmm.
And society is absolutely chock a block full of lies. We lie to our kids because we were lied to, and so we pick up the habits of. Uh, this is something that's remarkable for anyone to understand, and that is that we treat our kids the way that our dads and mothers and dads treated us. That we learn our parenting skills through observation. So every mistake that mom or dad is going to make in a child's life, that child's going to repeat those mistakes because he learned it from his dad.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Well, it's
Many examples of that. One of them that's well known is that children who are raised in a violent household tend to live as an adult in a violent household. If you get spanked a lot, you're likely to spank your kids.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we really do want to hit those kids. But by doing so, we're training those kids to hit other kids ad infinitum.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the buck has to stop here. Sometimes somebody's got to wake up and start treating these kids better so that the kids don't have so many problems when they grow up. But the only one who can do that is the one who did grow up and did survive that kind of childhood and now can learn to get over it and not have to operate as if we were still in that position.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Let me just turn the camera on. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Hold on just a second. Let me text here. I'm still here. I feel like I can't stop talking to you. Like it's just one open door after another open door, and then it's just more information. It's just like endless.
It's not endless, though. That's the whole point. The Dhamma is actually quite small. If there's anything, the almost endless is the number of lies you've been told. The truth is very small. The wholesome is small.
Actually,
Unwholesome is vast.
I know, right? I actually come up with another question about vaccines. Okay, so
Okay.
so far, so far the data says say that vaccines are helping and they're safe. What if, just like the doctor didn't know about the ventilator, what if, like a year later, they find out that there is something else besides the, just immunity that gets protected? Maybe there's some
Okay.
kind of side
That
effect.
that is actually quite possible. You could go so far as to say within one or two people, everyone who had had a vaccine drops dead. And we have
Yeah,
now
yeah.
millions of corpses around because everybody who had the vaccine dropped dead. That's possible. But the likelihood is highly remote.
But
It is
how,
highly remote. And not
but
only that, but if the whole civilization who had been vaccinated suddenly dropped dead, the survivors would have a whole lot more problems because all of the politicians, all of the professionals, all of the people who have any intelligence at all of your top military leaders, everyone like that would have dropped dead, leaving us with nothing but the idiots who were too stupid to get vaccinated in the first place. And what are they going to do to each other?
I'm the one that I'm the idiot who did not get vaccinated. So, and I understand I won't be able to.
Okay. For sure, Putin has been vaccinated, so he's going to be in that drop dead category too, but so is all of the oligarchs and everybody who runs Russia. And can you imagine what Russia is going to be like when everyone who had any power at all is dead and gone just suddenly? I mean, all you've got is just a whole city full of corpses.
I don't
That's
think it.
possible. And guess
Yeah,
what? Humanity will survive anyway. And if not, at least the planet Earth could take a breather. Well, I'm glad I'm over that human experience. Now we can go back and have some fun with monkeys. And that's just how things are. Okay. But the likelihood of that happening is so remote. Why is it remote? Is because it's been tested and over tested and over tested, and they have collected the data. They've been very careful with it, and that not only that, but there's some science underlying that vaccine. In other words, you're afraid of the vaccine out of pure ignorance. The people who work with the vaccine are not afraid of it because they know what's in it.
but how about the workers of Johnson and Johnson not willing to get vaccinated? The vaccine, the those that develop vaccine.
Well, the people who develop the vaccine are not the ones, but there are some workers at any place are stupid enough, even though their employer is wise. There's a lot of people who are still stupid. I haven't heard of the story about employees at Johnson and Johnson, but I have heard a lot of the other stories about it, and all of them wind up saying that the vaccine's pretty good. It's actually got a lot of benefits that the other vaccines don't. But yes, there are people who are afraid of it, but the fear mostly comes out of media and other places where people are taking advantage of the fear. They can promote the fear. That a lot of people just cannot understand that, yeah, they do, and for 50 years have required vaccinations for rubella, smallpox, and all kinds of things in schools. And now those same parents who have been vaccinated and have their kids vaccinated, now they've heard strange stories from who knows where, and now they don't want to have their kids vaccinated for this new problem because of all the lies they've been told.
Hmm.
So we can get back to that issue. The number of lies that are out there is vast, and the amount of reality is quite small. Let me give you an example of that. You don't
Hmm.
have to answer these questions, but
Hmm.
one question would be that you are how old? There's a certain year age that you have.
Hmm.
Let's just say that that's X, okay? Now tell me how old you are, but lie to me. Lie
I
to me.
would I would make it smaller.
Okay,
33.
so now I ask you again, how old are you? Give me another number and lie to me.
Okay, 24.
Okay, lie to me again. How old are you?
36.
How about 300? How about 9,000?
Oh,
How
well, I.
about 4? Okay, the number of lies is endless, but the truth is there's only one of them.
Mm-hmm.
When you begin to understand that not only is truth that way, but wholesome thoughts are that way, that the vast number of unwholesome thoughts is unbelievably vast, but the number of wholesome thoughts is quite small.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're working with staying with the wholesome and staying with the real, that means that we have to figure out what is not real and not wholesome. And that's where all the lies have come from. And in fact, there's an old song that was done in the A Star is Born out in the 1970s with Barbara Streisand and Chris Christopherson. And in there, uh, there was a song of climbing higher and higher, but the line that stuck with me is the master magician who has freed you from all the lies that you've been told. And
Mm-hmm.
most of these lies are going around telling you you can't do this and you can't do that, or that you should do this and that you should do that. And the reality is that our whole society is based upon a set of lies. You could go so far as to say that the biggest, we could put that lie into one word called capitalism. Capitalism is the biggest lie that's ever been told.
I
Why?
agree.
Because it goes with greed, it goes with selfishness, it goes with harm. It is a false teaching. A much more sophisticated teaching would be society, would be cooperation, getting
Mm-hmm.
along. Let's have a family here. Let's not have so much competition. The one number one word that would best describe capitalism is competition.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the best
Now,
one word to use to describe happiness is cooperation.
but do you agree that competition in a healthy, isn't it okay, healthy way? I don't know whether there is a way to compete healthy, but it allows you to think outside of the box. It allows you for more ideas to flow. Like the
How
spirit.
is what you sound like is that you're describing cooperation and calling it competitive. No, competitiveness is backbiting, stabbing, lying, shysterism, bait and switch. Uh, any money that you lose on this transaction is money I win. Therefore, I should phrase the transaction to make my advantage. That's capitalism.
But I cannot not participate in it, and I have to compete in skills and my education, and also like because I'm a part of this.
That's what you've been told. That's part of the lies. You don't have to compete with anybody. You can make friends with them instead
And and work together.
and work together. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to compete. You can cooperate. You don't have to compete within your own mind, also. You can cooperate. This is where we learn cooperation is by learning to cooperate within.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because normally we're a crowd inside.
Yeah.
We're a crowd inside. We compete with each other. The parent competes with the child, going around telling the child what to do. You go around telling yourself what to do, and then you resist. Oh, well, I don't want to do that. I can't hear you now. Okay,
I told my mom to be quiet.
no problem.
Okay. So all right. Yeah,
So
I noticed that a lot of people in my mind that are talking to me and arguing and competing and pitting. I can recognize them, the thoughts, the voices, whatever you call this,
right.
and
Mm-hmm.
come
Don't
come
worry about
back to
her. Never mind her. You're okay.
Okay.
Yes, you do. We often remember the actual voices of where we've heard things. But over time, it just gets into one big mush of an authority figure we carry in the mind that can be called the parent ego trait. And he goes around giving us ourselves orders
Mm-hmm.
that we then don't carry out.
Mm-hmm.
You could go so far as to call that ideas, even
Mm-hmm.
technical ideas. That in fact, artists draw far more pictures in their mind than they ever put down on canvas.
Well, yeah, there.
Musicians write more
Yeah,
music in their mind than they ever put down on paper. The number of ideas that you have of this might go and I do that, you never do any of that stuff, or not any
well,
of it, but you do most of it. You don't do.
there's a filtering system that allows you to not murder someone. The same filtering system that does not allow you to speak the truth sometimes too.
Well,
When
let us call that then wisdom that is actually then going against the instincts, which is what we were talking about with the vaccine. Now we can put it on to murdering somebody. You really, really are afraid of them, and you've got a great big knife in your hand. You picked up that knife because you were afraid, but now you've got motive. Okay? But it's wisdom that's going to keep you from stabbing them in the back because you know it's the wrong thing to do. But
correct, yeah.
but the feeling, the intention is to go get them.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve it. They done you wrong. You
Yeah.
need some revenge here, right? But you're wise enough to recognize, no, that's not going to happen. And so basically, then you eventually come to the point that wisdom's going to win on that one every time. And so you just put away all your ideas of killing people because you know you're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have many thoughts of killing people.
No, I don't.
Well, a lot of people have a lot of thoughts of killing people.
I want to smack, someone. Some
Okay. Oh, you don't want to kill them
hurt.
big, you want to kill them little. I got
Yeah,
it.
yes, the
But you
same.
want your way.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you get your way, then you won't feel so afraid.
Mm.
But if you were completely fearless and you didn't need your way because whatever way is going, that's okay. Then with wisdom, you can act wisely rather than acting according to the way you feel. And this is absolutely upside down and backwards to the way that society is built up. And no church will tell you that. All the churches will say you got to follow your heart.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And following your heart is always going to take you right into the sewer because we're not watching where we're going. We're following our heart instead.
Yeah.
In other words, we're trying to get what we want without recognizing that that may be really dangerous. Smacking someone for you to feel safe is a very dangerous thing to do. If you don't
Mhm.
smack them, you're safer.
Mhm.
If you smack somebody, they may smack you back, and then where's your safety?
Oh man, yeah.
So, this is a major point about the teaching of the Buddha, and that is investigation. To really look, to get your data, to recognize that you don't go around smacking people for you to feel better, that there's got to be better ways of behaving so that you
Mhm.
feel better without having to smack somebody in order for you to feel better.
And that includes seclusion, and maybe
That's right,
Buddhism.
taking a hike. That's one of the things that I wanted to mention before is that the Buddha recommended for the monks to avoid particular kinds of areas. Just don't go there. If you go into a particular area, neighborhood, city, or whatever, and some of this stuff is happening, you leave. Okay, there's four items. One is if there is pestilence. Okay,
Pestilence?
that's COVID, right? COVID. So get yourself away from whoever has COVID. Get yourself away from them. Number two, if there is a war zone, don't go into a war zone. If you're in a war zone, leave the war zone. Even if that war zone is an entire country, get out of that country. Go to some place where there is no warfare. Okay. Number three is that if there is a famine or if there is no food, to
Mm-hmm.
get out of that place. In fact, that the monks don't belong there because they're not going to get any food because the people are not going to feed them because the people are eating that food for themselves and still starving. So get out of a place where people are hungry and starving. Go someplace else while you still can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the fourth one is going to be a flood, also for the same reason. So anytime that there's pestilence, warfare, um, um,
Famine?
famine, any kind of thing like that, that gives us a guide for what parts of Moscow are you going to go into.
Yeah. Now, okay, how about I mentioned that before. No matter where you are, where you go, there you are. Now, even if you're in a tough situation, like say in a war zone, it's the mindset that helps you, not removing yourself from it. So this is
Hmm.
where I'm getting confused. So is it still, you can still live within the war but be happy, or you need to really remove yourself, just like the Buddha
It
recommended?
depends upon the skill level that you have. Most people can't live in a war zone and be happy. I don't think that I could live in a war zone and be happy, but I certainly know how to get out of a war zone, and I also, better still than that, know not to go into known war zones.
uh, hmm,
Which would be like, for instance, just sitting here and watching two people in the house having a fight.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. If there's two people in the house having a fight, that's a war zone. I'm not going to get involved with that. But many people want to go in and break up the fight. Guess who gets hit next? The guy
Mm-hmm.
who's trying to separate two people fighting. So that's a war zone. Don't go try to separate two people fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Now, if
war
the
zone.
fight is happening to you, you just don't react,
You
right?
can
Like,
just walk away.
walk away. That's right. I mean, easy.
Yeah, you can say, "Hey, I got to go to the bathroom right now. I'll be right back," and then you don't.
It's tricky. Okay, yeah. I mean, I can
Yeah,
do that.
if somebody's in your face and you don't want to deal with them, you could just say, "Well, I got to go right now, but this is not a good time." Here's a really interesting example. I use this often. The 14-year-old student is walking down the hall at school, and around the corner he sees the bully and his two buddies with him. This 14-year-old freezes. The bully sees him and comes up and bullies him. If that child had had some wisdom and he saw that bully coming around the corner, he would have sped up, walked quicker, walked right past the bully, and if the bully had said something to him, he says, "I got to go now. I'm in a hurry," and just kept right on walking. But no, when we're afraid, we freeze, and then we get attacked.
How about a kid who is being bullied, but then he goes into martial arts and then nobody messes up with him?
Well, why go through all of those martial arts when all he had to do is just walk away?
So it's not, yeah, I understand that's an easy way, but, but I get it. I understand. So
Yeah.
avoid any
We don't have
situation.
to teach the bully a lesson. He's not our boss. I mean, he's not our job to do.
Yeah.
You don't have to go kick the bully to teach him a lesson. You can just walk away from him.
Hmm.
You don't have to become a grand politician just so you can beat Donald Trump in an election. You can just walk away from him.
That's my point, that if with this mindset I should be living somewhere in Thailand just like you do. That's
It's not a bad idea. Only the problem is that COVID-19 is affecting things now. That's part
yeah,
of your data.
yeah.
That they are madly trying to get vaccines in this country because they gave them all out. They have vaccine to everybody.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, if you come to Thailand, you'd want to have a vaccine.
Yeah,
So you,
yeah.
you should.
Now
In fact, you
also,
can't even get here without having a vaccine.
well, but that's another point. So between countries, like for example, Russia versus the U.S., you get a vaccine in Russia, it does not count in the U.S.
Right. I don't trust anything that's Russia. Russia is actually a dirty word in the United States, and you know that.
So where do I get even vaccinated if I am to choose to get vaccinated?
Any vaccine is better than none at all.
Yeah, and then I have to vaccinate twice here and there and
But
anywhere
aren't
else
they
I get.
talking about boosters and whatnot like that? So maybe a Moderna and a Japanese and a Chinese and a Russian vaccine all together would be a cocktail that's for sure going to make you okay. Because they
Then why?
all have effectiveness. They all have effectiveness. They're all effective. They're just none of them are 100% effective.
Yeah, exactly.
But here you are afraid of each and every one of them.
It bothers me that I have to do something I don't want to. It bothers me that it's given.
Yes, but
It's like,
bothered by doing something that you don't want to do is a habit that you picked up when you were a child. And you could have picked up the habit of recognizing the things that need to be done could be done with joy instead of resistance. That nobody
mhm.
likes to be told to do stuff, even when the thing that we're told to do is a good thing to do. But if we could figure it out with our wisdom, oh, that was a good thing to do. Yeah, thanks for the advice and go do it. But no, humans are resistant. We do not like to do what we're told to do.
Yeah,
And we pick
absolutely.
that up as a habit when we're babies because it's nothing but a habit. That not all children are raised with that habit. But I'll tell you what, I know enough about Eastern Europe and Russia to know that that is a big habit that is really trained into the kids.
Yeah.
But it's also trained into the kids in the United States too. But
Yes,
it's
there's
not
a lot of.
trained into everybody. That's
Mhm,
more of a
mhm,
Western culture kind of thing. But that particular aspect of Western culture, Russia has a big case of it.
mhm.
A big case of it. And so you can see that Eastern Europeans and Russians and whatnot will react with anger to many things.
Oh yeah, and it's pretty open. Yeah, like there's no filter. Basically, it's just bursts of anger.
It just right.
Yeah.
But they train their children to do that, and then the children grow up and do that and train their kids to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's just a habit, but that habit had a base of instinct. But that because so to the instinct is the nesting instinct, which happens then that we go along to get along. We learn behaviors
Mhm.
as children, and then we repeat those behaviors. Monkey see, monkey do, basically.
Mhm.
And if the child sees the adult angry and uptight and upset, the child learns how to be angry, uptight, and upset. Even if he hates his dad being angry, uptight, and upset at him, he still learns that from his dad. And when he's 40 years old, he finally wakes up to the fact that he's just like his dad. Even though he hated his dad, he's just like his dad.
Yeah, I don't exactly. I recognize my parents. I don't want to repeat it, and I feel like environment did change my attitudes towards
Yeah,
it. But
that's all of this really is to wake up and recognize that you've got choices here.
yeah,
You've got choices. You do not have to feel bad. You do not have to feel sad, but you are carrying around a burden of habits that you picked up as a child, just like we all did. Every child is messed up by its parents. It's part of the show, part of the process. The question is can you unmess yourself? And then can you less mess your own kids?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you don't want to continue on with that. If we cut it
That
here.
exactly, exactly. You
Okay, every
can't.
time I talk to you, you like give me a permission to think for myself, for like freedom to choose, like freedom to like look where what I
To
want to
really
do.
look at what's going on inside your own mind, which is kind of differently than thinking for yourself. The
Yeah,
thinking for yourself is what you've been doing all along, but the thoughts that you were thinking were borrowed from your parents and your other people. And so
yeah.
they're not actually your thoughts anyway.
hmm
And now we're beginning to examine those thoughts. So, yes, you can have your own thoughts, but you have to do that by getting new data, new input, and start operating with new data, new input, rather than the ignorant old data and the old input that we memorized when we were kids and then used all of these years, living our lives just like everybody else did.
Okay, question: where can I get? Do you have any recommendations in how to get good data? Where do I get data? Like in terms of, I don't know, maybe some
Are
kind of
you talking about coronavirus or are you talking about the better stuff?
everything.
All right.
Not
You do
yeah.
that by gathering data from your senses, by looking with your eyes, listening to what people say, but also listening to their tone of voice and to listen to their motives behind what they're saying and things like that. But then also, you can look for data in the sense of I mean, Google is a marvelous search engine. If you
Mm-hmm.
search with the right kind of terminology, they will give you just the data that you're looking for. And that's a skill to be learned is to how to use Google.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could Google something like latest CDC,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that will give you some data about what the CDC is saying. The CDC is worth trusting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several reasons why I know that it's worth trusting, and you probably don't. One of the ways that I know to trust the CDC is because I've got a student and friend who is a biologist who lives and works in Atlanta and cooperates and works with the CDC on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a PhD in biology and he really knows what he's doing. And he doesn't have any issues at all about the CDC because he knows what they're doing. That basically what your position is that you don't know how to who to trust because you're getting a lot of conflicting information and in some ways we can begin to understand that there are things that are worth trusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so if you have any trust about what I'm saying, you can hear that I trust a friend who lives in Atlanta who does trust the CDC because he works with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're only 2 or 3 degrees of separation now from you to the CDC, which before you didn't know that. You didn't know that you could have any trust with them at all. But you can go to Google and start Googling that. Here's
Mm-hmm.
another example. You can see the conflicts of interest. That's another way of seeing wisdom is when you see conflicts within an interest group. An example of that is that Donald Trump has been absolutely against the vaccines in one case, and he's absolutely for them in another case. He's had the vaccine. He says that the vaccine got started under his administration, but then because of all of his people who were afraid of the vaccine, okay, so now he's not going to support the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one you can see is that when people begin to change, an example of that is that the governors, some of the southern governors who were directly against the vaccines and the masks, are now beginning to change because they can see for themselves that their old position of political gain was not the right way to go. Okay, so there's many different ways of looking at it, but don't just automatically assume that somebody's telling you the truth and other guys are telling you the truth, and therefore there's a conflict. There's no conflict. One's
I feel like
lying, and the
it's
other
just,
one's telling the truth.
I hear you, but isn't CDC another big business? You know that.
No, it's not. It was tried to be turned into a big business by Donald Trump, but he failed miserably at that. And that
Mhm.
is now it's reverted to be the center of disease control. That's what the word means.
Yeah, yeah, that's initially what it
And
means.
he
But
tried to politicize it, and now they're going back to actually doing disease control rather than political control.
mhm.
That basically you can say it this way: if it's a politician, he's lying.
Well, that's why I don't even go into listening to any one of them, and then I feel like CDC is part of this because
No, the CDC is not part of the politics. The CDC was manipulated by the politics. The CDC and also the NHS. I have never been to the CDC, but I have been to NHS in Washington. And some of the best minds and the best scientists work in these institutions. And these institutions, even though they're operated by the government, are not political at all. They've got no reason to lie. They've got good reason to figure out what the truth is. But the CDC was devastated by the politics.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so if it's a political issue, you can tell that it's just two groups of people lying to each other and screaming at the top of their lungs.
Mm-hmm. I
Don't
guess
trust the politicians.
in my eye, anything connected to government is already untrustworthy.
Well, that's a different way of looking at it is that here in Thailand, on Reddit, on the Thailand Reddit scene, the Westerners who live here are the ones who own Reddit, and they keep complaining about the Thai government, this, that, and the other thing. And occasionally a Thai person will come on and say something like that, why do the Farongs hate the Thai government when the Thai people just ignore it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it, okay? Don't hate the government, just ignore it.
That's a good one. I think it should be a banner.
Uh huh. Yeah, the government is irrelevant.
Just ignore it. Yeah.
And the more people who thought the government was irrelevant, the more irrelevant the government would become. The only reason the governments are relative is because some people are too stupid to see through it.
Mm-hmm.
They think the governments have meanings. No, the government has no meaning. It's got no relevance. It's just a bunch of people collecting together, lying to each other, trying to pick each other's pockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Oh, right. Well, but a bank can't ignore a bank system.
Pardon?
Like, how about bank system? So I recently found out that you know there, there are lots of fees that get applied to accounts that you can't get rid of. You can't return money. It's just a big money making business. But you can't live without a bank card or bank account or some kind
Right.
of
So that means that you need to inspect carefully what bank you're going to have so that you'll know whether you can trust them or not.
correct, but the choices are poor. Like it's overall corruption. Like it's every
Yeah.
single bank.
And even the most honest banks will cheat some of their customers some of the time. But even the most corrupt banks can't get away with cheating all of their customers all the time.
I don't know. It's happening here all the time. I hear you. I know what you're saying. It's just basically investigating yourself and the
Well,
data.
I know that for family reasons and whatnot, that there's got some reasons for being in Russia. But I don't know of anyone that I would recommend to go there to stay.
Yeah. Now, do you
That
have
I would put, in fact, I would put Russia second on the list of places not to go.
now do you have any recommendation where you would want to go? Do you have any place that you think people should be looking at, or like
Well, eventually I'm going to go under the ground or up in smoke.
yeah, but now in the living in
Well, if the proof is in the pudding, then Thailand is recommended, but a lot of people will find problems with Thailand and whatnot also.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but the important thing is to go with those four issues of don't go to places that are dangerous and go to places that are safe.
Yeah.
And that for a lot of people, Russia is a safe place, and for other people, it's not. Depends upon whether you think the government is irrelevant. If you think the
Mhm.
government's irrelevant, then Russia's probably a pretty safe place. If you think the government is dangerous, then it's not a good, safe place to live.
Yeah.
And right now, a lot of people think the Russian government and Putin and all of that is pretty dangerous,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
as would be the general consensus, I think.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. All right. Well, I guess I have to reevaluate what I'm doing.
Well,
And what
it's not so much a reevaluating of what place you're in, but to
yeah.
reevaluate your mind state about where the place you're in. Because it's really a whole lot easier to change your state of mind than it is to change the state government that you're living in.
Yeah, or the location, geolocation. Yeah.
Hmm. So, getting to the point that the government is irrelevant,
Mhm.
then you could just look at the data and recognize that yes, it's safer to take a vaccine than it is to not take the vaccine.
Mhm.
And so you take the easy, safe way out. That's wisdom. Instead of being all in turmoil and afraid, which is the instinctual way to do it. Being confused and in doubt and not know and not sure of what to do is the instinctual, ordinary way that we would do it. And that's because that's the way that we learned to do things when we were a child.
Mhm. Mhm. Got it.
But now you're growing up, and so now you can recognize, no, I can do my own research. I can figure this out for myself. I do not
Yeah.
have to have the be the victim of I don't know what to do. Please tell me, Daddy. Into the I can figure this out for myself. I can go do the research and I can get the data and I can figure it out.
Mhm.
Okay. That's the teaching of the Buddha again, is to investigate rather than feel our way through life.
Mhm.
And you can do that.
Oh,
You can figure
absolutely.
you can figure out whether you need to take the virus or not.
Yes, absolutely.
But
I
if
don't
you
know.
do research instead of just hearing here and there and this and that, go look at real data. That's the thing that we can tell. That's the distinction. Is that the truth has data going with it, and lies have nothing to support them but more lies until it becomes a web of lies, a thicket of
Mhm.
views.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you can cut through those that thicket of views. You can look this way and peer that way and begin to see some daylight through that stuff. And you can do it happily. You can do your investigation happily. I'm going to figure that out.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true. Yeah, and I do enjoy the experience, the different kind of experience throughout life anyway. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Well, let's finish this call now and let you go off and do some research and whatnot, and we'll talk later, okay?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of work to do a
Oh,
lot
you've
of
got a lot of toys to play
a
with,
lot, exactly, a lot of toys.
a lot of new toys to play with. That's the way to look at it.
That's right.
All right. Well, we'll see you later.
Thank you, Dhammarato. Yeah, have a good the rest of the day and talk to you soon.
Okay.
And we'll talk about once I get my computer about the YouTube.
Yes. But you've
Okay.
gotten logged in now. That's the important thing.
Yes, yes, I did.
But you did that on the cell phone, so you may, if you log on the computer, will also require a code. If I see
Yes.
one, I'll send it to you.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I will let you know when I'm
All
doing it.
right.
Where, okay?
Excellent. All
Awesome.
right.
Bye bye. Thank you. I truly am grateful for you. Thank you for being here.
Gratitude. That's a very wholesome
Oh yeah.
feeling.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.